Knight isn't making this up. Dickens frequently makes allusions to swearing in his books. In Great Expectations, a character can be found swearing horribly. But why were so many of the first sentences rewritten? If the original was written in a way that would confuse contemporary readers, it might make sense. But it's not the Canterbury Tales, it's Great Expectations. With only slight alterations, much of Dickens' dialogue could be incorporated into a contemporary TV drama. According to the creators, the adaptation starts off faithfully, before providing Steve's take on the material in episodes 3 and beyond. We'll have to wait and see if Knight changed the ending, but there are rumors to that effect. Additionally, they are reserving any robust criticism of the Empire for later installments. The first episode of the series features Peep trying to hang himself by tying a rope around his neck and leaping off a bridge in 1839 London. We quickly flashed back 7 years by entering the primary title card. A young Peep is toiling away while reciting some Shakespeare. Next, we shift to this tense setting that feels like a prison, where two guys, Maywitch and Compeyson, shout about how much they hate one another. The guard says they won't have any option but to be side by side until they reach Australia. We can see that Compeyson isn't content to watch his fellow inmates suffer, so he starts a fire in his cell and hatches a scheme to escape. Maywitch, who is Compeyson's cellmate, begs him to let him out, but the man orders him to burn in hell and walks away. Maywitch, on the other hand, manages to get away and kill the officers one by one. Young Peep wishes to go see his parents on Christmas Eve, but his sisters Sarah and Jo advise against it because of the cannons going off. Jo makes an effort to defuse the situation and convince Peep to stay. Jo then warns Sarah that he will leave if she beats Peep once more. We witness Peep sneaking out of the bedroom window later that evening, which causes problems. Peep is captured by Maywitch while watching the gravesite of his parents, and he orders him to get him food and clothing to keep him warm. If he doesn't, he'll bury his sister, her husband, alongside his parents. Peep delivers a lot of food and beverages to Maywitch as promised. Maywitch begs him to remove his chains before asking if he has ever seen anyone else who looks like him. Talking about Compeyson, a short while later, Compeyson makes an appearance and asks Peep if he has seen Maywitch. Of course, Peep lies and claims he knows nothing because he is scared. Peep, Sarah, Jo, and Mr. Pumblechook show up for dinner with the news that Miss Havisham needs Peep. Since they couldn't locate a boy in the right class, Miss Havisham adopted a girl who needed companionship over 13 years ago, and Mr. Pumblechook chose Peep. The guards storm into the house to declare that 2 men have fled and that the soldiers must come out and find them as Sarah becomes excited about the prospect of getting paid for Peep to go to Miss Havisham's. The soldiers' search for these men forces Jo and Peep to assist them. Peep admits to Jo that he is unsure of the agreement with Mr. Pumblechook, but is certain that he doesn't want to take over the blacksmith business while they are on their journey. The troops overhear Compeyson and Maywitch engaged in combat. As Maywitch is about to kill Compeyson, a soldier enters and tackles him. At this point, we see the two covered in mud beating each other up. The superior officer then asks Maywitch regarding how he removed his ankle chains. While he had the opportunity to put Peep in jail, he claims that instead he stormed into a blacksmith's home and freed them. In the scene, Peep and Biddy are debating how he uses his agreement with Miss Havisham to aid Jo and his sister. She informs him that she doesn't like his plan. Now that we can see it, Peep and Mr. Pumblechook are on their way to visit Miss Havisham. Peep finally shows up at the house to meet Miss Havisham and Estella. The meeting between Miss Havisham, Peep, and Estella is shown in the episode's final moments, and it proceeds exactly as expected. "I want to observe you play," says Miss Havisham as she forces them to talk about each other. Even though Coleman has little on-screen time in the first episode, she still has an impact. Sarah closes the curtains on their home to start episode 2. Then Jo gets to work on his blacksmithing. Then we see Miss Havisham forcing Peep and Estella to participate in a game in which he must locate Estella while he is blinded. If he succeeds, she is entirely his. But as he moves around, she places obstructions in his path, making the game harder. It's a montage of Peep playing the game while Sarah also spanks Mr. Pumblechook. Estella and Peep can be seen discussing her situation in that house. She talks about how horrible it is and how she needs to locate a wealthy man to help her escape. After that, Peep gets socked in the face by Herbert, a youngster who Estella claims is in love with her. To see him battle and defend her, Estella is coercing the two into a fight. She then interrogates him about all of the plans he has for the future to develop into a gentleman. We go to court number 1 at the Old Bailey, where a guy is pounding on a man's door to try to get one of his clients in front of the judge. The judge approaches him with a gun, but he hesitates before pulling the trigger. The next thing we see is Jaggers, the knocking man, compelling the judge to sign the papers releasing a prisoner. A short while afterward, he charges outside to free his client before being hanged. Peep describes his day to Estella when he gets home. Before he can continue, Mr. Pumblechook stops to share the wonderful news of Miss Havisham's affection for Peep with Joe and Sarah. Sarah doesn't like the way Peep conducts himself, but he tells her he wants to leave as soon as possible and start a new life elsewhere. In episode 1, we first encounter a young Biddy, but in episode 2, we get a better sense of who she is. Biddy is with him. She is the intelligent student who Peep picks on at school. In this episode, Peep explains his desire to hire her as his tutor so that he can impress Miss Havisham and Estella. Peep receives daily lessons from Miss Havisham and Estella at her residence on how to treat a woman in public. Then, there is a time shift, and an older Peep and Estella are seen meeting at the entrance. Today is Peep's birthday, and Miss Havisham and Estella have a treat in store for him. Peep is informed by Miss Havisham that he must be skilled in horseback riding, boxing, dancing, and sex. They send him upstairs, where he receives sex with Mrs. Givens as his birthday present. Peep follows instructions despite his strong reluctance, and amusingly, shortly after Mrs. Givens turns around, looks at him, and smiles. Then, we see Jaggers conversing with a scribe who is composing a letter to Miss Havisham about Peep, and how he will assist the boy be what she needs him to be, and how he will make accommodations for the boy. Later that day, Estella teaches Peep some French, which has recently become necessary for him to acquire. Finally, Peep hurries over to Biddy and asks her to start teaching him. Miss Havisham informs Peep that he will approach a woman who only knows French to dance at a society ball he will be attending. Peep has a rough start, but he manages to land with Estella, and they begin dancing. Miss Havisham asks Peep if he loves Estella after the dance, but he attempts to explain to her that his aim isn't to fall in love. She doesn't care though, and wants him to go above and beyond to win Estella over. Finally, she gives him coin and instructs him to purchase some new clothing. Pip goes to the dock to sell the coin and receive payment. In an effort to impress Estella, he returns to the home wearing his new clothes. When he arrives, Estella is sobbing while watching from the window. She eventually emerges to greet him, but Estella informs him that Peep has finished learning. Estella hurries back inside even though she is unsure of what he did wrong and is extremely shocked. Only softly can we hear him utter, "I'm in love with you." He is drinking in a bar as the episode draws to a close, and Jaggers enters the bar in search of him.